Mark Volman wasn't just another rock musician from the 60s. He was the face and the sound of one of the most unforgettable anthems of the era. But on September 5th, at the age of 78, his story came to a sudden end in Nashville after what his family described as a brief, unexpected illness. Fans knew he had been battling Lewy body dementia for years, yet this final twist still shocked the music world. What makes Volman's story so compelling isn't just the chart-topping hits or the packed arenas, it's the wild nights with Lennon and Hendrix, the rebirth of his career as a professor, and the resilience he showed when life threw its harshest challenges at him. And today, we're diving into the journey of the man who gave us Happy Together, a song that outlived its era, much like the legacy of Mark Volman himself. Long before the world knew him as the grinning, curly-haired frontman of the Turtles, Mark Volman was just a teenager in Los Angeles with a saxophone and a dream. In 1963, he teamed up with his classmate Howard Kaylan in a band called the Crossfires. At first, they were just another group of kids trying to imitate the surf rock sound dominating California. But within 2 years, they rebranded as the Turtles, and everything changed. Their breakthrough came in 1965 with a bold choice, covering Bob Dylan's It Ain't Me Babe. At a time when Dylan was considered untouchable, their version stormed into the top 10 and made the industry take notice. Suddenly, the Turtles weren't just another garage band, they were a serious force. What really set them apart, though, wasn't just the songs. It was Volman's stage presence. That wide grin, the mop of curls, and the energy he brought to every performance made him instantly recognizable. And when Happy Together hit the charts in 1967, the band catapulted to global fame. The track didn't just sell millions, it became a soundtrack to an era, the kind of song that still turns up in movies, commercials, and karaoke nights more than half a century later. By the time they released hits like Elenore and She'd Rather Be With Me, the Turtles had cemented themselves as one of the defining pop rock bands of the 60s. And for Volman, the ride was only just beginning. Because when the band finally split in 1970, he didn't fade away. He reinvented himself. When the Turtles disbanded in 1970, many expected the bandmates to quietly disappear into the long list of one-time hitmakers. But for Mark Volman and Howard Kaylan, the end of the Turtles was just the start of a new chapter. They rebranded themselves as Flo and Eddie, a quirky duo name that gave them freedom to experiment far beyond the pop image they'd built. Their first big move, joining forces with Frank Zappa's Mothers of Invention. Touring with Zappa exposed them to a completely different side of rock, avant-garde, unpredictable, and often outrageous. For Volman, it was the perfect playground to show he could thrive outside the radio-friendly world of the Turtles. And they didn't stop there. Flo and Eddie became some of the most in-demand backing vocalists of the 1970s and 80s. Their voices can be heard behind legends like T-Rex, Duran Duran, and even Bruce Springsteen. It's the kind of hidden legacy that casual fans never notice, but insiders knew that if you wanted harmonies that popped, you called Volman and Kaylan. This period also solidified Volman's reputation as more than just a singer. He was adaptable, sharp, and willing to reinvent himself at every turn. The world might have remembered him for Happy Together, but he was determined to prove that his story didn't end there. And while his collaborations were impressive, it was the stories from backstage, the wild nights with rock icons, that would eventually become legendary. For Mark Volman, life after the Turtles wasn't just about staying in the business. It was about living at the very heart of rock and roll's golden age. And the stories he carried from those years sound like something pulled out of a dream. He partied with John Lennon at a time when the former Beatle was in his wildest, most unpredictable phase. He shared nights with Jimi Hendrix, watching the guitar genius transform rooms with a single riff. To Volman, these weren't just encounters, they were lived experiences that blurred the line between being a performer and being a fan. In 2023, he finally gathered those memories into his memoir, Happy Forever. The title itself hinted at the spirit Volman carried, a mix of humor, gratitude, and a refusal to let the darker chapters define him. Inside the book, he painted scenes of chaotic tours, surreal studio sessions, and the kind of backstage antics that would make today's headlines look tame. Looking back, Volman described it with humility. "It all sounds like a dream now. I'm just a groupie at heart." It was a confession that showed how, despite the fame, he never lost his sense of awe for the music and the people around it. But while his memoir cemented his place in rock history, Volman was also quietly building something very different for his future, far away from the chaos of touring and the bright lights of the stage. By the time Mark Volman reached his 40s, he had already lived the kind of rock and roll life most people could only imagine. But instead of burning out or fading into nostalgia tours, he made a decision that stunned even his closest friends. He went back to school. At Loyola Marymount University, Volman pursued a master's degree in screenwriting. Sitting in classrooms surrounded by students decades younger, he proved that curiosity and ambition don't have an expiration date. While most knew him as the man who belted out Happy Together, on campus he was just another writer trying to sharpen his craft. Armed with his degree, Volman turned to teaching. He eventually became a music professor at Belmont University in Nashville, guiding the next generation of musicians and storytellers. For his students, having a former rock star as a mentor was more than just a novelty. It was a chance to learn from someone who had lived through every triumph and setback the industry could throw at you. And Volman took the role seriously. He wasn't just there to lecture about chords and contracts. He inspired his students with personal stories, lessons from the road, and a reminder that success in music wasn't about fame. It was about connection. This quieter chapter of his life showed a man who refused to be defined by a single era. From chart-topping hits to university classrooms, Volman built a second act that was just as meaningful as the first. But even as he thrived in this new role, an unexpected challenge was already looming, one that would test every ounce of his resilience. In 2020, Mark Volman faced news that would shake anyone to their core. After months of strange symptoms, hallucinations, tremors, and difficulty focusing, he was diagnosed with Lewy body dementia, a progressive neurological disorder that slowly strips away memory, movement, and independence. Most people in his position would have stepped back from the spotlight, retreating into private life. But Volman's response was different. In an interview just 3 years later, he admitted the diagnosis had hit him like a wave, but he also made a decision. He wouldn't let it define the rest of his story. "Whatever's going to happen will happen," he said, "but I'll go as far as I can." And he meant it. With medication to help manage the tremors and visions, he kept performing with the Turtles on their Happy Together tour, a nostalgia-fueled celebration of the 60s music that brought fans together year after year. Even as his longtime partner Howard Kaylan stepped back due to health issues of his own, Volman stayed on stage, flashing that same trademark grin. For fans, seeing him perform despite his condition wasn't just entertainment, it was inspiration. He reminded audiences that resilience could shine even in the face of decline. In his own words, "The challenges of this world affect everybody, and it's been kind of fun being on the other side of a challenge like this and saying, I feel good. My friends are here, I'm still here, and I want people to connect with me." It was a powerful message. Volman wasn't pretending everything was fine. He was proving that life, even when fragile, could still be lived fully. But as his health struggles continued, the world didn't just remember his challenges. They remembered the way he kept giving right up to the end. Even as his health declined, Mark Volman never stopped reaching out. In January of 2025, his final Instagram post wasn't about himself at all. Instead, he urged his followers to stay strong and come together in the face of devastating wildfires. That message, selfless, unifying, hopeful, was a reflection of the man behind the music. On September 5th, 2025, he passed away in Nashville after what his family described as a brief, unexpected illness. Though he had lived with dementia for years, the suddenness of his death left fans and friends stunned. He was 78. Volman leaves behind his partner Emily, his ex-wife Pat, their daughters Hallie and Serena, and his brother Phil. But his legacy stretches far beyond family ties. For fans, he will always be the smiling face behind Happy Together, a song that continues to bridge generations. For his students, he was the mentor who believed in their talent even when they doubted themselves. And for fellow musicians, he was the harmonizer, the one you could count on to make the music fuller, richer, better. His story is a rare one in rock and roll. He wasn't consumed by the excess, nor did he fade into obscurity. Instead, he built a career that spanned decades, reinvented himself when the spotlight dimmed, and faced life's harshest challenges with humor and grace. Mark Volman showed that being happy together wasn't just a lyric. It was the way he lived, connected to the people, the music, and the moments that mattered most. Mark Volman's journey reminds us that music isn't just about the notes or the fame, it's about the connections that last long after the spotlight fades. From the teenage kid jamming in a high school band, to the rock star belting out an anthem that defined a generation, to the professor shaping young artists, Volman lived a life that refused to be boxed into one era. Even in his final years, battling an unforgiving illness, he kept showing up for the fans, for his students, for his friends. His message was always the same: stay connected, stay strong, and keep going as far as you can. And that's the kind of legacy that doesn't die with a person. Every time Happy Together plays at a wedding, on the radio, or in a movie, it carries a little piece of Volman with it. A reminder that even in tough times, joy can still unite us. So now the question is for you. What's the first memory that comes to mind when you hear Happy Together or think about the Turtles? Share it in the comments. I'd love to know how Mark Volman's music touched your life, because while his story has ended, the songs, the smiles, and the lessons he left behind will keep echoing Happy Together for generations to come.